Aloha kako. Okay, so I know that we were only supposed to bring one slide, but last week I already had all 5 slides completed. So if it's okay, I'm going to go through them kind of fast. Okay, so this was the title I came up with at about midnight after the kids had driven me crazy all day and after about 2 monsters and a cup of coffee in. My hope was to highlight Noenoe Silva's articulation of mo'oku auhau consciousness as a method to recall ike kupuna and cultivate resistance in the classroom through remembrance and active presence. And that would mean returning to the guiding, begin quote, source of life, of divinity, and of ancestral wisdom, end quote. And
I use it outside.
Okay. And that wisdom, divinity, and source of life is Po. And that was a quote from Nawahine Kapu by Lilikala Kame'elehiwa. This is the epigraph I'm using. It's from Lii-Namuliwai Smith's work, Decolonizing Methodologies, and I'll read it real fast. Begin quote. The colonizer did not simply design an education system. They designed an education especially to destroy indigenous culture, value systems, and appearance. End quote. I know it's not from the beautiful and extensive list of resources provided by Kumuke Kai, but I felt it captured the overall theme of historical injustice and trauma inflicted and committed against the indigenous world through mechanisms of cultural genocide by using the education system to kill the oiwi in us to save the Kanaka. Here, and because I mentioned the demographics of our public schools to highlight the overwhelming presence of the settler societies, settler beneficiaries, I put a small kind graph to show the diversity, or lack thereof rather, of teachers in Hawaii's public school system. 25% are white, 24% Japanese, 10% identify as Hawaiian, only 7% Filipino, and 26% identified as multi-ethnic. I use this to underscore how these spaces become colonial spaces of dominance, ones that also become spaces of renegotiation to be transformed into wahipana aloha aina. Because, begin quote, what is meant to subdue and suppress in time awakens and empowers. It reveals the structures of oppression to revive the voices of those who are expected to remain in silence, end quote. And that's just a short quote from my final paper. Enrollment of students by diversity, see that Kanako Iwi and Pacific Islanders make up only 27.1% of the population totals in our schools. And of course, that's aggregated information. Asian and Asian Pacific Islanders are 26.9% of the population, 16.4% have 2 or more races, 16% Latino, only 11.8% are white, 1.5% Black or African American, and only 2% American Indian or Alaska Native. These are my level 1 subheadings. Originally, I had 3, but I added in the brief history of education in Hawaii as my first level 1 subheading. I then go into erasure and exclusion, violence and experience using my daughters and my niece's experiences. Aloha Aina, survivance and resistance through active presence is my last level 1 subheading. I took Kumu's feedback from my midterm and endeavored to answer 2 questions out of the some like 7 questions I had on there. So first being, historically, how has the Mo'oku Auhau or genealogy and structure of settler colonialism functioned to erase indigenous existence to dominate spaces of knowledge acquisition? 2, in what ways have and can Kanako Iwi assert presence in white privileged spaces? So I threw this slide in because, as is aforementioned, I use the experiences of my eldest daughter and niece to show how student advocacy and activism starts with the awareness of place and space. If we engage with our keiki to combat oppressive colonial narratives and miseducation with mo'oku auhau consciousness and concepts of aloha aina, through a collective refusal to remain bound to these fallacious myths, they become active participants and storyers of their realities and histories. Thus, they cultivate resistance within spaces historically created to silence our ancestors into oblivion. And that's it. Oh, I hope everybody had an awesome semester. I hope you guys all get good grades. It was a privilege and pleasure to be within this space with all of you folks. And yeah, I hope you guys all the best in your guys' future endeavors. You guys are awesome. Ahui ho.